Here are the 100 genius Native American winter surviving tricks that made the difference between life and death on the frozen plains. For anyone else, a monster blizzard would be a death sentence. But for generations, families turned a simple cone of hide and sticks into a fortress of warmth, surviving temperatures that could kill in minutes. They engineered a perfect shelter, mastered the secrets of fire, and understood the rhythms of the cold. But their greatest test wasn't the storm raging outside. As the temperature plunged into the deep negatives, a silent killer crept inside the tipi. The family's elder began to fade, his breath growing shallow in the supposed safety of their home. How do you save someone from a cold that has already breached your walls when there is nowhere else to go? Subscribe. It helps these documentaries to reach more people who are interested in traditional survival skills as well, and maybe help them to fall asleep. And drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see our map light up. Our journey begins not with a sound, but with a feeling. It is a change in the very texture of the air, a subtle weight that settles over the vast, windswept landscape of the northern plains. The world is holding its breath. The sun, a low, pale disk in the sky, offers little warmth, casting long blue shadows that stretch from the skeletal fingers of the cottonwood trees. The land is in that quiet, fragile space between late autumn and the first true freeze of winter, a time when every living thing knows a great shift is coming. Here, in a sheltered river bend, a small family group is making their camp. Their movements are unhurried, economical, born of a wisdom that does not need to rush. It is a knowledge that flows from one generation to the next, as surely as the water flows beneath the ice of the creek. We are here to witness this quiet transfer of wisdom, to learn alongside a boy whose eyes are just beginning to see the world as his elders do. Imagine standing with him in this quiet grove. The trees around you are mostly cottonwoods, their bark a pale, silvery gray, deeply furrowed like the lines on an old man's face. High above, their bare branches clatter softly in the moving air, a sound like dry bones whispering secrets. A grandfather, his own face a living map of seasons past, stands beside the boy. He does not speak. He simply turns his head, his gaze steady, and points with his chin toward a specific spot just inside the deep curve of the frozen creek. It is a gesture that contains a lifetime of understanding. He is teaching his grandson not with words, but with a shared stillness. He is teaching him how to read the land, to understand its language of contours and whispers, not just for what is present in this moment, but for what is inevitably coming. For this is where the story of survival truly begins, not with the building of a shelter, but with the choosing of a place to listen. The boy, perhaps 10 or 11 winters old, follows his grandfather's gaze. He tries to see what the old man sees. At first, it is just a clearing, a patch of earth a little flatter than the rest, covered in a thin, brittle layer of frost-hardened grass. But he holds the image in his mind, and he lets the lessons he has heard 100 times before begin to surface. His grandfather has taught him that the land always offers a gift, a place of sanctuary, but you must know how to look for it. You must learn to ask the right questions of it. The first question in this country is always about the wind. The great north wind, the Waziata, is the true ruler of the plains in winter. It is a wind that carries teeth of ice, a relentless force that can strip the warmth from a body in minutes and bury a camp in drifts as tall as a man. It is a killer, and all life out here must bend to its power. The boy squints, looking beyond the clearing. He sees how the riverbank on the north side rises into a high, earthen wall, a natural shield carved by the water over countless springs. He sees how the grove of cottonwoods and willows thickens right at that point, their tangled trunks and branches forming a second, more porous wall that will catch and break the wind's first assault, forcing it to pass over them rather than through them. Here, in this chosen spot, the air is almost still. He can feel the difference on his own cheeks. Out on the open plain, the wind would be a constant, biting pressure. Here, it is just a distant sigh. This is the first part of the land's gift. Next, his eyes scan the ground and the surrounding trees. Shelter is nothing without fire, and a fire is a hungry thing. A winter fire, one that must burn day and night, is ravenous. To survive, you cannot waste energy. The boy knows that the most foolish man is the one who builds his lodge far from his firewood, for he will spend all his strength just to feed his flame, and one day, when the storm is at its worst, he will not be able to make the journey. His strength will fail him, and his fire will die, and so will he. Here, the gift is plain to see. All around the clearing are standing dead trees, mostly willow and smaller cottonwoods that were choked out by their larger brethren. They are silver gray and bone dry, their bark long gone. This is the best wood. Wood that lies on the ground soaks up the moisture from the snow and the earth, and when it burns, it sputters and smokes, wasting its heat to fight the water trapped within it. But this standing wood has been seasoned by the wind and the Sunday. It is light and dry, and it will catch a spark easily, burning with a clean, bright, generous heat. There is enough of it here to last for weeks, maybe longer. It is another piece of the quiet answer the land has offered. Finally, there is the question of water. The creek is frozen solid, its surface a milky, opaque white, but the grandfather has taught the boy that ice is not a barrier. It is simply a door. The sound of the river is gone, but the river itself is still there, moving dark and slow in the deep cold beneath its frozen skin. Life needs water, even in winter. Melting snow is possible, but it is slow and requires a great deal of firewood to produce even a small amount. A pot full of snow is mostly air, and it takes a long time to render down into drinkable water. And if you are not careful, the snow at the bottom of the pot can scorch before it melts, giving the water a foul, burnt taste. It is far better, far more efficient, to get the water that is already water. The old man had walked the length of this bend earlier, tapping the ice with the butt of his axe. Listening, the sound tells the story. A deep, solid thud means the ice is thick. A higher-pitched, hollow ring means it is thinner, right where the current is forced around the sharpest part of the bend. The ice rings with that higher pitch. Here, the door will be easiest to open. They will not have to spend an hour chopping through 2 feet of solid ice. They will only need to break through a few inches to reach the life-giving flow below. Wind, wood, water, the 3 great needs. And here, in this one small circle of the world, the land has provided them all in abundance. It is a gift of perfect placement, an act of listening that happened long before the first pole was ever lifted from the ground. The grandfather nods, a slow, satisfied motion. He saw the understanding dawn in the boy's eyes. He saw him read the landscape, connecting the lessons in his memory to the reality before him. Now, the rest of the family moves with a quiet, shared purpose. There is the boy's father, a man in the prime of his life, his movements powerful and sure. There is his mother, her hands knowing and quick, and his grandmother, whose quiet presence is the warm heart of the family. There is no confusion, no debate about what to do next. The decision has been made through a silent communion with the world around them, a consensus reached between the old man and the land itself. The family's role now is to accept the gift and honor it with their work. The story of survival, the boy is learning, is not a battle against nature. It is a conversation with it. It is a dance of observation and response. It is a state of deep, quiet attention, and that attention is the first and most important tool they possess, more vital than any knife or axe, more valuable than any buffalo robe. And so, in the fading light of the afternoon, with the air growing colder and the sky beginning to harden from a pale blue to a flat, heavy gray, their work begins. But it is not the frantic work of people racing against a clock. It is the calm, rhythmic, and graceful work of a people who know they are in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time. They are home, and now they will build their house. Now, the work begins. It is a calm and rhythmic work, a physical prayer offered to the coming winter. The focus turns to the skeleton of the home, the collection of lodgepole pine poles that lie beside the chosen spot like a handful of giant, scattered arrows. These are not just sticks of wood, they are the bones of the family's life, as essential and as cherished as their own limbs. They have been carried with them across the plains, their smooth, pale surfaces darkened with the smoke of 100 fires, polished by the touch of hands from generations gone. Some of these poles are older than the father himself, inherited from his father, who got them from his. When a pole finally cracks or weakens with age, it is not simply discarded. It is given back to the fire, its stored warmth and light released in a final act of service to the family it sheltered. Finding and preparing a new one is a long and careful process, a journey high into the hills where the lodgepole pines grow in thick, competitive stands, forcing each other to reach straight for the Sunday. A man would search for days to find a tree with the perfect straightness and taper, and then the slow work of peeling, smoothing, and curing would begin, ensuring the wood was light, strong, and resistant to the weather. These poles are a testament to that patience, a library of the family's history, and they are treated with a quiet reverence. The father walks among them now, his moccasins making soft, crunching sounds on the frozen grass. He is not just choosing wood, he is calling on old friends. His eyes, and the eyes of the grandfather who stands watching, are looking for 3 specific poles. These will form the foundation, the unshakable heart of the structure. It is what some call a tripod, the strongest freestanding shape in the world. This is a geometry learned from the mountains that rise in the distant west, from the way a broken branch will brace itself upon the ground. It is a piece of ancient and perfect engineering, a law of the physical world understood not through mathematics on a page, but through a lifetime of observation. Nature itself teaches that 3 points of contact create absolute stability. A chair with 4 legs can wobble on uneven ground, but a stool with 3 legs never will. And in a land where the wind can come like a charging buffalo, stability is everything. The father selects the first pole. It is a hand's breadth thick at its base, tapering to a point nearly 20 feet away. He runs a bare hand over its surface, feeling for any splinter or crack. Then he finds 2 more, nearly identical in length and weight. These 3 are laid side by side on the cold ground, their bases even, their tips pointing toward the sky. The family works in practiced silence. The mother and grandmother are off to the side, beginning the work of unrolling the great, heavy bundle of the buffalo hide cover. But their attention is also on this central act. The boy stands near his grandfather, watching every move, imprinting it on his memory. Now comes one of the most critical steps, a small detail upon which the integrity of the entire structure depends: the tying of the knot. The father takes up a length of rope. It is not a rope of twisted grass or plant fiber, which would stretch and weaken in the damp cold. It is a rope of braided sinew, taken from the long, powerful muscle that runs along a buffalo's spine. The women had spent many days preparing it, shredding the sinew into fine threads, soaking them until they were pliable, and then rolling them against their legs, twisting them together to form a cord thinner than a finger but strong enough to hold a struggling horse. It is a material that, once dry, shrinks and hardens, pulling any knot into an iron-hard grip. With this rope, the father measures a distance from the tips of the poles, about a foot down. This space is important. It is where the poles will cross, and the small forest of tips that stick up above the knot will form the crown of the tipi, the place where the smoke flaps will later be adjusted. He begins to wrap the rope, weaving it between and around the 3 poles, his hands moving in a blur of practiced efficiency. He is tying a special, non-slip knot, a pattern of loops and turns passed down through generations. It is designed to bind the poles together with immense force, so they act as a single unit when raised. But it is also a clever knot, for a single, specific end of the rope is left long, dangling down the length of one of the poles. This rope will later be inside the finished tipi, and by pulling on it, the knot can be loosened or tightened from within, allowing for tiny adjustments to the structure without ever having to go outside into the storm. It is a simple, hidden piece of genius. With the knot tied and tightened, the first great lift can begin. This is the moment when the skeleton is given life, when it rises from the earth. It is an act of strength, but more than that, it is an act of balance. The father positions himself at the center of the bound poles. He crouches, gathering the immense weight onto his shoulder. His legs tense, his back straightens, and with a low grunt of effort, he begins to rise. The poles, acting as one, lift from the ground. First the tips, then their long bodies, scraping softly against the frozen earth as he heaves them upward. He is now standing, the combined weight of all three poles, perhaps 200 pounds or more, resting on his shoulder and held in balance by his strong hands. Slowly, carefully, he begins to walk the base of the tripod forward, hand over hand, until the poles are standing nearly vertical, a giant, closed fan pointing at the iron-gray sky. He then allows the butts of the poles to fall to the earth, where they land with a solid, satisfying thud that echoes in the cold, still air. The initial structure stands, a tall, narrow triangle against the vast and empty plains, but its strength is not yet realized. Now, the magic of the three-legged heart must be revealed. The father takes one pole, the one that will face the back, away from the door, and walks it outward. Then he takes the other two, spreading them apart to form the entrance. The boy watches as the three poles are carefully spaced on the ground. His father is not making a perfect circle. He is marking out the shape of an egg, slightly wider at the front and narrower at the back. This is another layer of hidden wisdom in the design. The steeper, narrower side at the back will face into the prevailing north wind, presenting a more aerodynamic profile that allows the gales to flow around it rather than pushing against a flat, resistant surface. The gentler, wider slope at the front creates more headroom and living space inside, pushing the sleeping areas away from the door and closer to the central fire pit that will soon be dug. The teepee's footprint is not just a circle, it is an intelligent shape, oriented to the specific challenges and needs of this very landscape. Once the three foundation poles are perfectly placed, they form a stable, open cone, a promise of the shelter to come. It is the heart of the home, now standing, its three legs firmly planted on the ground, its head reaching for the sky. For a moment, everyone pauses their work to look at it. In its beautiful simplicity, it is already a home. It has defined a sacred space in the vast wilderness, a center point around which the family's life will revolve. The work is far from over, but the most important step has been taken. The three-legged heart has been raised, and it stands strong and steady, ready to receive the rest of its ribs and its warm buffalo hide skin. It is a geometry of life, learned from the forest and raised by human hands. With the three-legged heart standing firm, the next phase of the work unfolds with the fluid grace of a well-rehearsed dance. The father now takes the remaining poles, one by one, and lays them into the open embrace of the foundation. There are 12 more of them, each one chosen for its strength and straightness, their tips sharpened to a neat point, their bases smoothed so as not to tear the precious hide cover. This is not a random process. There is a precise and logical order to the placement, another piece of inherited engineering designed to give the lodge its maximum strength against the prevailing winds. The father begins on the north side, the side that will bear the full brunt of the winter gales. He lifts the first of the remaining poles, its weight familiar on his shoulder. With a smooth, powerful motion, he walks it toward the tripod, slides its tip up into the V where the three foundation poles cross, and settles it securely in the tight embrace of the sinew rope. The base of the pole he places firmly on the ground, creating another rib in the growing skeleton. He adds 2 more on that northern side, placing them closer together than the others will be. This deliberate reinforcement of the windward wall is a critical detail. It is like a man turning his shoulder, not his chest, to a blow. It strengthens the structure where the pressure will be greatest, ensuring the lodge will stand firm when the blizzard tries to push it over. The boy watches, his gaze moving from his father's hands to the top of the structure and back down again. He sees how the addition of each pole makes the whole framework tighter, the poles pressing against each other at the crossing point, locking themselves into place. The sound is a soft, woody scrape and a solid thud as each pole finds its home. The father continues his work, moving around the circle he and the grandfather have laid out. His movements are efficient, never wasted. He does not need to pause and measure or guess. His body knows the proper spacing. His eyes know the correct angle. He fills in the sides of the cone, pole by pole, his breath beginning to plume in the air, a visible sign of his effort and the changing atmosphere. As the structure becomes more complete, it begins to transform. What was a sparse, three-legged frame is now a dense, symmetrical cone of wood, a perfect piece of natural architecture standing against the pale sky. It looks like a giant, inverted bird's nest, a promise of the warmth and security that will soon be created within. He leaves the widest gap for last, at the front, where the door will be. The two poles that will frame the doorway are placed with special care, their bases set slightly wider apart. Between them, the family will enter and leave their small, portable world. With the final pole in place, the father steps back to admire his work. 15 poles in all, standing together, their collective strength far greater than the sum of their parts. They lean on each other, support each other, a silent community of wood that will soon shelter the community of people. The grandmother nods in approval. The skeleton is ready. But as this careful, methodical work has been proceeding, a change has come over the world. It is not a dramatic, sudden event, but a slow, quiet, and certain shift. The deepest challenges of this land rarely announce themselves with a shout. They arrive as a subtle alteration in the light, a different note in the wind, a quiet signal that only the most attentive will notice. The first sign was the sky. An hour ago, it had been a soft, late autumn blue, streaked with the pale gold of the low Sunday now. That color has been completely erased. A high, thin veil of cloud has moved in from the north, so uniform and seamless that it does not even look like cloud. It is simply a change in the color of the day. The sky is now the color of flat, gray iron, a heavy, seamless lid that has been lowered over the plains. The light that filters through it has no direction, no warmth. It is a dead, even light that leaches the color from the landscape, turning the gold of the dry grasses to a drab tan and the silver of the cottonwoods to a flat, stony white. The long shadows of the afternoon have vanished, swallowed by a universal gloom that feels ancient and absolute. The world has become a sketch made with charcoal on a gray piece of hide. With this change in light comes a change in the air itself. The gentle coolness of the afternoon has been replaced by a deep and penetrating cold. It is a cold that seems to rise from the frozen ground, a cold that has a physical weight to it, settling into the hollows and pressing against the body. It creeps into the seams of their clothing, a persistent, searching chill that is impossible to ignore. It is the kind of cold that promises to go on getting colder, a cold that means business. The grandfather, who has been standing as still as the trees, now turns his head slowly, his nostrils flaring. He lifts his face to the wind, closing his eyes for a moment. He is tasting the air, reading its invisible story. The boy, watching him, does the same. He breathes in deeply through his nose, but he smells nothing but the cold. His grandfather, however, smells something more. He smells snow, not the damp, earthy smell of a wet spring snow, but the sharp, sterile, almost metallic scent of a dry, hard winter snow. It is the smell of a storm that is born in the Arctic, a storm that carries the essence of the frozen seas and the great ice sheets in its breath. He turns his head and looks not up at the sky, but down into the tangled willow brush that lines the creek bed. His eyes are searching for the small, quick movements of the chickadees. These tiny, black-capped birds are among the hardiest creatures on the plains. They are cheerful and energetic, constantly flitting from branch to branch, their familiar calls a constant presence in the winter landscape. But today, they are silent. The grandfather's gaze finally finds them. They are not flying. They are not calling. They are deep inside the thickest parts of the brush, huddled close to the main stems where the branches are densest. They are puffed up into tiny, perfect spheres of black and gray and white, their feathers trapping a layer of air to insulate their small bodies. They are conserving every bit of their precious energy. For the chickadees to be this still, this silent, this deeply hidden, means they know a great storm is coming. It is a threat so profound that even their resilient natures tell them to take refuge and wait. They are a barometer, a living signal that confirms what the grandfather's senses have already told him. He says nothing. He simply catches his son's eye and gives a short, sharp nod toward the northern horizon. The father understands immediately. He has seen the same signs. He has felt the same change. And now, the pace of the work quickens. It is not a rush born of panic. There is no wasted motion, no shouting, no fear. Panic is the luxury of the unprepared, and these people are anything but. This is a quickening born of focused purpose, an understanding that the window of opportunity for calm, methodical work is closing. The game has changed. A few minutes ago, they were building a home for the sake of comfort and a good night's sleep. Now, they are sealing a fortress against an approaching army. The stakes have been raised from simple well-being to absolute survival. The mother and grandmother, who had been methodically unpacking bundles of bedding, now move with this new urgency. The mother gathers the handful of long, smooth wooden pins, carved from chokecherry wood, that will be used to lace the front of the teepee cover shut. The grandmother begins to secure their smaller bags and bundles, making sure nothing is left loose that could be caught and carried away by a sudden, violent gust of wind. Then, it comes. At first, it is almost invisible against the gray sky, a single tiny white flake, then another, drifting not down but sideways. They are not the big, soft, fluffy flakes of a gentle snowfall. They are small and hard and granular, like tiny grains of ice. They sting the cheek when they land. A few more appear, then a dozen, then 100. Within a minute, the air is filled with a thin, driving screen of white, a ghostly curtain being drawn across the plains. The wind, which was just a whisper before, now finds its voice. It is a low, steady moan that begins to hum through the 15 tippy poles, making them vibrate like the strings of a giant instrument. The family must now raise the great buffalo hide cover and seal themselves inside. They must complete this final, critical task before this first wave of flakes becomes the blinding, driving, suffocating wall of white they know is following close behind. Their survival now depends on this last race against the iron-gray sky. Here, laid out upon the frozen ground, is the teepee's skin, its warm and breathing robe. This is the final and most crucial element, the barrier that will turn the raw skeletal frame into a true home. It is a vast, smoky-smelling semicircle of buffalo hide, a patchwork map of a dozen lives given so that this family might live. To the boy, it is as familiar as his own mother's face, a landscape of seams and textures he has slept under for all his winters. But today, as the snow begins to drive and the wind's voice deepens, he sees it with a new appreciation. He sees it not just as a blanket, but as a shield. The story of this great hide cover is a story in itself, a testament to the immense skill and labor of the women. This was their domain, a long and arduous alchemy that transformed a stiff, raw animal skin into a material of incredible suppleness, strength, and weather resistance. The process for each of the 12 hides that make up this cover was the same. After a successful hunt, the women would stake a fresh hide to the ground, flesh side up, pulling it taut so that there were no wrinkles. Then, using a scraper made from the leg bone of an elk, its end sharpened to a chisel-like edge, they would begin the grueling work of scraping away every last trace of fat and membrane. It was a rhythmic, repetitive motion, scrape, 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 that went on for hours, their bodies leaning into the tool, their strength flowing into the hide. Once the flesh side was clean, the hide was flipped, and the even more difficult work of removing the hair began. If the hair was to be left on for a winter robe, the hide was simply dried. But for a teepee cover, the hair had to be removed to make the hide lighter and less likely to hold moisture. The hide was soaked for several days in a creek or a pool of water, which loosened the hair follicles, and then the scraping process was repeated, the women working until the skin was a pale, clean, uniform surface. The raw, scraped hide was still stiff and would become as hard as a wooden board if left to dry. The next stage was the secret to its softness, the brain tanning. After the scraping, the hide was washed and wrung out, a task requiring the strength of 2 women twisting it around a tree limb. Then they would use the animal's own brain, a greasy, fatty substance rich in natural emulsifying agents, mashing it with a stone and often mixing it with liver and a little water to create a paste. This paste was rubbed deep into the fibers of the damp hide, a messy, hands-on process that was essential for breaking down the stiff collagen fibers. The hide was then allowed to sit, to soak in this brain mixture, and then came the hardest work of all, the stretching and pulling. As the hide began to dry, it had to be constantly worked, stretched, and pulled over a taut sinew rope or a smoothed, upright log. The women would work for hours, sometimes all day, their hands and arms aching, pulling and rubbing the hide, back and forth, back and forth. This constant motion, this physical argument with the drying fibers, is what made the hide permanently soft. If they stopped too soon, the hide would dry stiff, and the work would be for nothing. The final step was the smoking. A small, smoldering fire of punk wood and dried grasses was made in a pit, and the softened hide was suspended over it, often sewn into a bag-like shape or draped over a small dome of willow branches to trap the smoke. This process, which could take a full day, gave the hide its beautiful, pale tan or smoky yellow color, and more importantly, it made the hide water-resistant. The formaldehyde in the wood smoke coated the fibers, preventing them from swelling up and becoming stiff again when they got wet. A brain-tanned hide that has not been smoked will dry stiff as a board after a rainstorm, but a smoked hide will remain soft and pliable. You can smell it now on the great cover as it lies on the ground, a faint, pleasant, complex scent of old smoke, of earth, and of the long, patient labor of the women. The 12 finished hides were then laid out and carefully trimmed by the grandmother, her experienced eye judging the exact curve and shape needed. They were pieced together into this perfect semicircle, stitched with thread made of sinew and an awl made from a sharpened piece of bone. The seams were overlapped and stitched with a strong, watertight lock stitch, a testament to the quiet perfection of their craft. And so this cover is not just a thing, it is a repository of knowledge, a physical embodiment of chemistry and engineering, a chronicle of the women's strength, patience, and skill. With the wind now pulling and snapping at the edges of the great hide, there is no more time for contemplation. The father goes to the collection of poles and selects one last one. This is the lifting pole, the key to raising the immense weight of the cover without the aid of pulleys or machines. It is slightly shorter and more slender than the others. The mother and grandmother find the exact center point at the top of the hide cover's straight edge. Here, a special flap with a reinforced hole has been sewn. They lash this flap securely to the tip of the lifting pole, their fingers moving quickly and surely to tie a knot that will not slip. The father then shoulders the pole, the immense weight of the entire cover, several hundred pounds of tanned hide, now connected to it. He positions the base of the pole near the center of the teepee frame, just behind where the fire pit will be. He takes a deep breath, his feet planted firmly on the frozen ground. Then he lifts, not with a sudden heave, but with a slow, controlled uncoiling of the power in his legs and back. The lifting pole rises, and the hide cover rises with it, a great, dark wing ascending against the driving snow. He walks the pole up, hand over hand, until it is vertical, and then he carefully walks it forward, settling its tip into the V at the crown of the tippy, just like all the other poles. The lifting pole has now become the final rib in the tippy's skeleton. The hide cover hangs from it like a massive cloak draped down the back of the lodge. The The moment the lifting pole is in place, the mother and grandmother each grab one corner of the huge semicircle. They pull. The heavy hide resists for a moment, and then it begins to move, sliding over the smooth surfaces of the framework poles. With the father inside the frame pushing outward to keep the poles steady, the two women walk in opposite directions, each pulling their side of the cover around the cone. You can hear the soft, scraping sound of the hide against the wood, a sound almost lost in the growing voice of the wind. As they wrap the world in buffalo hide, a profound transformation occurs. The open skeleton disappears. The view of the iron-gray sky is cut off. The wind, which had been flowing freely through the poles, now strikes a solid barrier. Its high-pitched whistle changes to a deep, low-frequency rumble, the sound of a great power being deflected. Step by step, the outside world is sealed away, and a new, protected world is created within. The two women meet at the front of the teepee, their faces red with the cold and the effort. They have brought the two edges of the cover together, overlapping them where the door will be. Now comes the final act of sealing the lodge. The mother takes the pouch of chokecherry wood pins. They are each about a foot long, carved to a smooth point at one end and with a slight notch at the other. Starting from about shoulder height, where the overlapping flaps begin, she pushes the first pin through pre-made holes in both layers of the hide, lacing them together. Then she moves to the next set of holes, a little higher up, and inserts another pin. It is like buttoning a giant's coat. She continues this process, pin by pin, until the entire front of the tipi, from the top of the doorway to the smoke hole at the very peak, is securely fastened. This lacing of the pins is what pulls the hide cover taut against the frame, giving the entire structure its final, drum-tight integrity. While she does this, the father and the grandmother begin the work of securing the bottom edge. They have a number of sharpened wooden pegs and a heavy stone or a wooden mallet. They move around the entire circumference of the teepee, pulling the hide down and driving a peg through a loop of hide or a hole cut into its edge, deep into the frozen earth. The sound is a series of steady, reassuring thuds, thud, 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 as each peg is driven home. This is vital work. It is this seal at the bottom that will prevent the wind from getting underneath the cover and lifting it, and it will block the insidious drafts of cold air that would otherwise creep in and steal all their warmth. With each thud of the mallet, the lodge becomes more secure, more permanent. The outside world has now been fully shut out. Inside, the light is dim, a soft, filtered twilight that glows through the translucent hides. The roar of the storm is now a muffled, distant thunder. A sacred world has been created, a circle of calm in the heart of the blizzard. The family stands for a moment in the sudden quiet, their breath visible in the cold air, listening to the muffled drumming of the wind against their new warm walls. The work of shelter is complete. Now we move from the outside of the finished lodge to the inside, from the grand work of construction to the fine art of management. The shelter is sealed, but it is not yet alive. It is a still, cold, twilight space, the air thick with the smell of hide and frozen earth. For the lodge to become a home, it needs a heart, and that heart will be the fire. But before the fire can be lit, the teepee needs its lungs. Our attention turns upward, to the smoke hole at the peak of the cone, and to the two distinctive flaps of hide that extend from it, one on each side. To a casual observer, they might look like simple decoration, like the stylized wings of a great bird resting atop the lodge. But these are no decoration. They are a piece of aerodynamic engineering so simple and so effective that it borders on genius. These are the smoke flaps, or as some of the old ones called them, the tipi's ears. And just as a person uses their ears to listen to the world, these two flaps are used to listen to the wind. They are the primary interface between the calm world inside the lodge and the chaotic, swirling storm outside. Understanding how to use them is the difference between a warm, clean, breathable home and a choking, smoke-filled tent that is uninhabitable. Outside the teepee, two final poles remain. They are longer and much more slender than the others, shaved thin and light enough for a single person to handle with ease. These are the smoke flap poles. The father steps back out through the unpinned door flap, bracing himself against the force of the wind, which is now carrying a thick horizontal spray of snow. He takes one of the thin poles, and the mother, from inside, pushes the corner of one of the smoke flaps out through the smoke hole. At the corner of each flap is a small, carefully sewn pocket of reinforced hide. The father guides the pointed tip of the long, slender pole into this pocket. Once it is securely seated, he has complete control over that flap. By walking the base of the pole around the outside of the teepee, he can pivot the flap, opening it, closing it, or changing its angle. He repeats the process on the other side with the second pole and the second flap. The two ears now have their controllers. They are no longer passive pieces of hide, but are now active, adjustable airfoils, ready to be tuned to the precise conditions of the storm. The grandfather has now taken over this crucial task, as his experience is unmatched. He steps outside, his movements slow and deliberate in the face of the gale. The boy follows, staying close in his grandfather's lee, watching. The storm is coming directly from the north, a straight, hard, powerful wind. The old man squints into the driving snow, feeling its pressure on his face. Then he begins his adjustments. The principle is simple, elegant, and born from millennia of observation of how wind flows over and around an object. It is the same principle that allows a bird to fly or a canoe to sail. The goal is to create a small area of low pressure directly over the smoke hole, which will act as a vacuum, actively pulling the smoke from the fire up and out of the teepee. It is not just a hole for smoke to escape through. It is the engine of a perfectly designed chimney. To achieve this, the grandfather first walks with the pole that controls the windward flap, the one on the north side, and pushes it so the flap is nearly closed, creating a steep, solid wall against the wind. Then he takes the pole controlling the leeward flap, the one on the south side, and pulls it far out, opening that side up wide. Now, as the powerful north wind strikes the teepee, it flows up and over the cone. When it reaches the nearly closed north flap, it is deflected upward. This stream of fast-moving air then passes over the open smoke hole and the wide-open south flap. According to a fundamental law of fluid dynamics, this fast-moving air creates a pocket of lower pressure. The stiller, higher-pressure air inside the teepee naturally wants to move toward this area of low pressure, and it carries the smoke from the fire with it, pulling it cleanly out of the lodge. The result is a perfect, smoke-free draft. It is a constant, gentle conversation with the storm outside. The grandfather stands there for a long time, making tiny, incremental adjustments. He pulls one pole a few inches to the left, pushes the other a little farther out, watching the way the snow eddies and swirls around the peak of the lodge. He is reading the invisible currents of the air, fine-tuning the system until it is in perfect harmony with the gale. The ears are not just listening to the wind, they are talking back to it, using its own power to serve the family's needs. This system does more than just clear the smoke. It also keeps the lodge stable. The open leeward flap acts like the tail of a weather vane, catching the wind and ensuring the teepee is always perfectly aligned to shed the storm's force. And by creating that updraft, it prevents powerful downdrafts of cold air from plunging through the smoke hole and chilling the interior. It is a masterpiece of design, a dynamic system that can be adjusted in seconds to respond to any shift in the wind's direction or intensity. With a final, satisfied nod, the grandfather props the bases of the two long poles against a heavy rock he had placed there for just this purpose, securing them against the storm's fury. He and the boy re-enter the teepee, pinning the heavy door flap closed behind them. The difference is immediate and profound. The low, rumbling sound of the wind is still there, a constant reminder of the storm's power, but the space feels secure, controlled. High above, through the smoke hole, they can see the gray, racing sky, but no snow is falling in. The lungs of the teepee are now working perfectly. The boy looks up at that opening. At the two ears he can just see the edges of, and for the first time, he understands them not as parts of a tent, but as living, functional organs. They are the nostrils of the lodge, breathing in concert with the great breath of the winter world. He now understands that the teepee is not simply a cone, a static shape. It is a machine for living, a tool that has been refined over countless generations until every angle, every seam, and every component serves a specific and vital purpose. He thinks of the reinforced northern wall of poles, the egg-shaped floor plan, the clever knot that can be adjusted from within, and now these two miraculous ears that listen to the wind. It is a symphony of quiet wisdom, a collection of simple solutions that, when brought together, create something of extraordinary complexity and grace. The lodge is ready. The family is safe inside their shelter, shielded from the storm's rage, listening to the muffled song of the wind, ready for the fire, the warm, beating heart, to finally be brought to life. With the storm now pressing its full, unyielding weight against the hide walls, the fire becomes the absolute center of life. It is the sun around which their small, domestic world will orbit for the duration of the blizzard. But lighting a fire for a long winter night is not as simple as tossing a few logs together. It is a science and an art form, a practice guided by a deep and practical understanding of the properties of wood. For not all wood is created equal. Each type of tree, each piece of wood, holds a different kind of fire within it, a different personality of warmth and light. Knowing the difference, and knowing what to burn and when, is the quiet wisdom that will make a small supply of precious fuel last for days, providing the right kind of heat at the right time. This is the art of fuel triage, and it is a lesson the boy has been learning since he was old enough to gather sticks. The family's carefully gathered firewood is stacked just inside the teepee door, shielded from the snow but still near enough to the cold entrance to prevent any stray sparks from threatening the bedding. The wood is not in one jumbled pile, but is sorted into 3 distinct stacks, a hierarchy of fuel that will be used in a precise and logical sequence. The first stack, and the one they will turn to now, is made up of dry, dead willow. These are thin, brittle branches and sections of smaller trunks that the father and the boy had snapped off from the standing deadwood in the creek bed. Willow is a soft, porous wood. Its gift is that it is eager to burn. It catches a spark with very little encouragement and bursts into flame almost instantly, producing a fast, bright, cheerful blaze. It is the perfect kindling, the wood that awakens the fire from its sleep. But its eagerness is also its weakness. It burns hot and fast, consuming itself in a flurry of light and heat, and then it is gone, leaving behind very little, just a pile of fine, white ash and a few quickly fading coals. It is a sprinter, not a long-distance runner. It is good for starting the fire, for providing a quick, powerful blast of warmth to chase the deep chill from the lodge, or for creating a bright light to work by. But to rely on willow alone to heat the lodge through a long winter night would be impossible. It would require feeding the fire constantly, waking every hour to add more fuel, an exhausting and unsustainable vigil. So, the willow is the first step, the invitation to the flame. The grandmother, the keeper of the fire, now takes over. In the center of the lodge, the father has already used a digging stick to hollow out a shallow pit in the earth, perhaps 1.5 feet wide and 6 inches deep. This pit is another simple but crucial piece of fire technology. Building the fire directly on the flat ground is inefficient. The fire would spread out, and much of its radiant heat would be lost sideways. By containing the fire in a shallow bowl, the heat is focused and directed upward, and it allows for the creation of a deep, consolidated bed of coals, which is the true heart of a long-lasting fire. The grandmother begins by taking a small handful of the driest material she has, a bundle of last summer's grass, dry and fluffy, and the papery, shedding bark of a river birch. This is the tinder, the very first meal for the spark. She arranges it carefully in the bottom of the pit. On top of this, she builds a small, airy cone of the thinnest, driest willow twigs, stacking them in a way that allows plenty of air to flow between them. A fire needs to breathe just as a person does. Now, she reaches into a small, beautifully decorated leather pouch. This is her fire kit. She removes a piece of flint, a hard, gray, sharp-edged stone, and a C-shaped piece of steel, her fire striker. Finally, she takes out a small piece of char cloth, a scrap of linen that has been partially burned in an airtight container until it is blackened and carbonized. This material is incredibly receptive to a spark. A single spark is all it will need. She holds the char cloth against the sharp edge of the flint, and with a swift, downward motion, she strikes the steel against the stone. A shower of tiny, brilliant orange sparks flies from the impact. On the third strike, a single spark lands on the black, velvety surface of the char cloth. It does not burst into flame. Instead, a tiny, glowing red eye opens on the cloth, a point of intense, flameless heat that begins to grow, slowly but steadily. She carefully places the glowing char cloth into the heart of the tinder bundle, folding the dry grass gently around it. Then she lowers her head and begins to blow, not a hard, forceful breath, but a long, slow, steady stream of air, a whisper of life. For a moment, nothing happens but a thin wisp of smoke. She continues her patient, rhythmic breathing, and the smoke thickens. The glowing red eye on the char cloth grows larger, spreading its heat to the tinder. Suddenly, with a soft whoosh, the dry grass and birch bark burst into a bright, eager flame. The fire is born. The grandmother smiles, a small, private gesture of satisfaction. She adds a few more of the small willow twigs, feeding the young flame, helping it grow stronger. The quick, bright light flickers and dances, pushing back the gloom inside the teepee, casting huge, moving shadows of the family against the hide walls. The lodge is instantly transformed. It is no longer just a shelter. It is a room, a living space defined by the growing circle of light and warmth. The family members move closer, turning their hands to the young fire, soaking in its initial offering of heat. Once the willow fire is burning strongly, it is time to move to the second stack of wood. This pile is made of cottonwood, gathered from the same grove. Cottonwood is a harder, denser wood than willow. It is more reluctant to catch fire. You could not easily start a fire with just cottonwood, but once it is lit, encouraged by the hot, fast flames of the willow, it burns with a completely different character. It does not flare up with the same wild energy. Instead, it catches slowly, and then settles into a steady, consistent, and long-lasting flame. It is the workhorse of the firewood hierarchy. It produces a good, solid heat, perfect for cooking, for heating the stones that will warm their beds, and for maintaining a stable temperature inside the lodge. It is the wood for the main part of the evening, the fuel that sustains the home. The grandmother now begins to lay larger, thicker pieces of the cottonwood onto the established willow fire. The willow flames leap up to embrace the new fuel, and for a while, the fire burns with a crackling intensity as the cottonwood logs catch. Then, as the willow burns itself out, the fire settles down into a quieter, more stable state. The flames are now a deeper orange, the heat a more radiant and penetrating warmth. The cottonwood will burn like this for a couple of hours without needing much attention, providing a reliable and enduring heart for their home. But even the cottonwood will not last the entire night. For the coldest, darkest hours, from midnight until the first hint of dawn, a special kind of fuel is required. And for this, they have the third and smallest stack of wood. This is the most precious of all, a few carefully selected logs of dense, slow-burning hardwood. It might be oak or ash, wood that the father had found in a rare grove farther down the river and carried all this way specifically for this purpose. Hardwood is the old man of the firewoods. It is heavy, dense, and extremely difficult to ignite, but once you convince it to burn, it will smolder for hours, releasing its heat with a miserly, patient slowness. It does not produce a big, bright flame. Instead, it creates a deep, long-lasting bed of glowing red-orange coals. This bed of coals is the secret to sleeping warmly and safely through a blizzard night. An open flame needs constant watching, but a bed of coals is a self-sustaining furnace. a reservoir of heat that will radiate warmth steadily for 6 or 7 hours without any need for additional fuel. Later in the night, just before the family settles down to sleep, the grandmother will carefully place these heavy hardwood logs onto the mature cottonwood fire. She will let them burn until the flames have died down and the logs themselves are glowing with an internal, cherry-red heat. Then she will bank the fire, pushing the coals together into a tight mound and perhaps covering them with a light layer of ash to insulate them and slow the burn even further. This small mound of glowing hardwood will be the guardian of their sleep, a silent, sleepless heart pumping warmth into the lodge while the storm rages and the family rests, secure in the knowledge that they will wake to a still warm shelter. This is the hierarchy of fire, the quiet wisdom of knowing not just how to burn wood, but how to conduct it, like a musician leading an orchestra, calling forth the right notes of heat and light for each part of the long winter night. With the teepee now a secure breathing shelter, and the fire a steady, beating heart at its center, our focus narrows. It moves from the grand architecture of survival to the intimate and immediate world of the human body. For even the most perfect shelter is useless if the people within it cannot maintain their own internal warmth. The principles that apply to the lodge, insulation, ventilation, and the careful management of energy apply equally to the small, fragile shelters of flesh and bone. The wisdom of winter living is a nested wisdom, a series of repeating patterns, from the great curve of the landscape down to the very clothes on one's back and the food in one's belly. The family now settles into the routines of the evening, each movement and object a testament to this deep, practical knowledge of how to live comfortably inside the circle of warmth they have created, while the world outside freezes solid. The first and most visible layer of this personal knowledge is their clothing. What they wear is not just a single, heavy layer, but a sophisticated, multi-layered system designed to trap air, manage moisture, and allow for a wide range of comfort. It is a logic that modern mountaineers and Arctic explorers would recognize immediately. Their innermost layers are made of the softest, most pliable brain-tanned deerskin or antelope hide, worn smooth-side against the skin. These are leggings, loincloths, and simple tunics, supple enough to move in without chafing, providing a base layer of insulation. But the real genius is in the next layer out. Here, they wear garments made from deer, elk, or sometimes the winter hides of young buffalo, but with the fur worn inward, facing the body. To modern thinking, this might seem counterintuitive. We are used to seeing the fur on the outside, a fashionable display. But these people were not concerned with fashion. They were concerned with thermodynamics. Animal fur and hair keeps a creature warm not because the hair itself is warm, but because it is incredibly effective at trapping a layer of still, non-moving air. This trapped air, heated by the body's own warmth, becomes the primary insulating barrier. By wearing the fur on the inside, they place this perfect, natural insulator directly against their bodies, maximizing its effectiveness. The air trapped between the long guard hairs and the dense, soft underfur creates a thick, personal envelope of warmth. An outer layer, often of the same hide but worn fur out or with the hair removed, acts as a windbreaker, protecting the precious trapped air of the inner layer from being disturbed by drafts. This system of layered, breathable hides is incredibly effective, and because it is not a single, cumbersome garment, layers can be added or removed to perfectly match the ambient temperature and one's own level of activity, preventing the one great danger of winter clothing: sweat. Sweating is the enemy. Water conducts heat away from the body 25 times faster than air. If a person works hard and their clothes become damp with sweat, that moisture will freeze the moment they stop moving, leaching the heat from their body with terrifying speed. Breathable hide allows this moisture to escape, keeping the skin and the insulating layers of fur bone dry and functional. Now, as the fire builds and the interior of the lodge warms, the family begins to unroll their sleeping robes and arrange their living space for the night. And this reveals another crucial piece of internal engineering within the teepee: the dew cloth, or what some called the inner lining. This is a second, interior wall of hide, often more lightweight deerskin, sometimes beautifully painted with family histories or symbols of power and protection. This lining is suspended from the tippy poles with sinew ties, but it does not go all the way to the top. It stretches from the ground up to a height of about 6 feet, creating a complete inner circle of hide within the main lodge. Its function is twofold, and both are critical. Firstly, it is a powerful insulator. The 6-inch to 1-foot gap between the inner lining and the outer tippy cover creates another large dead air space, a second room-sized layer of insulation. Cold air that might seep through the seams of the outer cover is trapped in this space and cannot reach the family. Furthermore, the conical shape of the teepee naturally creates a convection current. Cool air from the bottom of the lodge is drawn toward the fire, heated, and rises. As it reaches the top of the lodge, it cools and sinks back down along the outer walls. The inner dew cloth intercepts this sinking cold air, preventing it from flowing down onto the people sleeping at the perimeter of the lodge. Instead, the cold air is channeled down the gap between the two walls and back toward the fire to be heated again, creating a continuous gentle circulation of warm air in the central living space. The dew cloth's second function is just as important, especially in the extreme cold. As the warm, moist air from the family's breath and any cooking they do rises and hits the cold surface of the upper part of the tippy cover, it will condense, forming frost or even beads of icy water. Without the dew cloth, this moisture would run down the poles and drip onto their bedding, making everything damp, cold, and miserable. But the inner lining catches all of this condensation. The moisture runs down the inside of the outer cover, behind the dew cloth, and harmlessly soaks into the ground at the very edge of the tippy, keeping the family's living area and their precious sleeping robes perfectly dry. It is a simple but incredibly effective moisture barrier, an invention that makes long-term winter living not just possible, but comfortable. Within the circle defined by the dew cloth, the grandmother arranges their sleeping robes, great, thick, heavy winter buffalo hides, tanned with the hair left on. They are laid with the hair side up, creating a deep, soft, and incredibly warm mattress that insulates them from the cold of the frozen ground. More robes will be used as blankets, their immense weight and warmth a profound comfort against the roaring of the storm. With their house in order, their beds made, and their bodies warmly clothed, the final piece of the puzzle is to fuel the internal fire of their own metabolisms. Surviving extreme cold requires an immense number of calories, particularly fat. The body must burn this fuel simply to maintain its core temperature, and for this, they had the perfect winter food, pemmican. The mother now opens a parfleche, a stiff, folded container of rawhide, and takes out a small, dense cake of this remarkable substance. Pemmican is arguably the most perfect survival food ever invented. It is a concentrated, nutrient-dense, and almost perfectly preserved mixture of lean meat, rendered fat, and sometimes dried berries. To make it, the women would take the leanest cuts of buffalo meat, slice it into thin sheets, and hang it to dry in the sun and wind until it was hard and brittle. Then they would lay this jerky on a hide and pound it with stone hammers until it was a fine, fluffy powder. Meanwhile, the richest fat from the animal was rendered down over a low fire into a pure liquid tallow. This hot, liquid fat was then poured into the powdered meat, along with a handful of dried choke cherries or June berries for flavor and vitamins, and the whole mixture was stirred until every particle of meat was coated. This rich, fatty paste was then packed tightly into rawhide bags, where it would cool and harden. The result was a food that was almost indestructible. Sealed by the fat from contact with air, pemmican would not spoil. It would keep for years, even decades. More importantly, it was the ultimate lightweight, high-energy food. A small handful could sustain a hunter for an entire day. It was almost pure protein and fat, the exact fuel a body craved to fight the cold. The mother passes a small piece to each member of the family. It is not a feast, just a few bites. It is rich and savory, the smoky flavor of the dried meat balanced by the sweetness of the berries and the pure energy of the fat. This is not a meal for pleasure. It is a meal for heat. It is a log for the internal furnace, ensuring their bodies have the fuel they need to keep burning warmly through the long, cold night. The camp is now running at peak stability. The storm rages, an unheard, unfelt abstraction beyond the warm walls. Inside, there is the gentle light of the cottonwood fire, the smell of wood smoke and tanned hide, the deep comfort of the warm furs, and the quiet security of a system in perfect, harmonious balance. The world inside the teepee has settled into a deep and comfortable rhythm. The orange light of the fire paints the inside of the hide walls with a warm, translucent glow, making the entire lodge seem like a giant, breathing lantern against the roaring darkness outside. The sounds are soft and domestic, the gentle crackle and hiss of the cottonwood fire, the quiet, rhythmic sound of the grandmother sharpening a bone awl, the murmur of the father's voice as he tells the boy a story. The storm's voice is a constant, low rumble, a bass note so steady it has become a form of silence, a white noise that isolates and insulates their small circle of warmth. In this bubble of peace, it would be easy to believe they were the only living beings in the world, completely detached from the frozen, violent landscape outside. But they are not. In the midst of this profound domestic quiet, a new sound emerges, sharp and unexpected. It is not a sound from within the lodge, nor is it the sound of the storm. It is the low, guttural growl of a dog, a vibration that seems to come from the very earth beneath them. One of the family's dogs, which had been curled into a tight, furry ball just inside the door flap, has lifted its head. Its body is tense, its hackles slightly raised, and its black, intelligent eyes are fixed on the hide wall. Its ears, sharp and pointed, are swiveling, scanning the darkness, listening to something far beyond the range of human hearing. This is the moment when the story takes a soft, quiet turn. It is not a turn towards sudden danger or high drama. Instead, it is a gentle but firm reminder that survival is not a static state of being that is achieved once a shelter is built. Safety is never an accident, and it is never permanent. It is a continuous practice, a state of constant, quiet awareness, a series of small, deliberate acts that must be attended to day after day, night after night. The growl of the dog is a punctuation mark in the evening's calm, a signal that prompts a subtle but important shift in the family's attention. The dogs that live with this family are not pets in the modern sense. They are not companions for amusement, to be coddled and pampered. They are working partners, essential members of the camp, with a vital role to play in the ecosystem of survival. These are not large, powerful hunting hounds, but smaller, tough, and incredibly resilient animals, descended from the ancient dogs that crossed the land bridge from Asia with the first people. They are intelligent, self-sufficient, and possess senses that are a profound extension of the family's own awareness. Their noses can read the stories left on the wind from miles away, and their ears can pick up the sound of a twig snapping in the dense brush long before any human would notice. In summer, they help carry small packs. In winter, they are the camp sentinels, its living, breathing, early warning system. The dog is not growling in alarm. It is not a signal of an immediate threat, like a bear or a mountain lion. It is a low, conversational growl, a growl of acknowledgement. It is simply saying, "I hear you. I know you are out there." The father looks at the dog, then glances at the grandfather. The old man has stopped his work and is listening, his head tilted. He knows what the dog has heard. The storm has not stopped the other lives from moving through the landscape. Out in the driving snow, a pack of wolves is on the hunt. They are not a danger to the camp itself. Wolves are intelligent and wary, and they have a deep, instinctual respect for the scent of humans and fire. They will not attack the lodge, but they are a threat to the family's larder, to their precious winter food supply. The dog's growl is a reminder of the constant competition for resources, a quiet acknowledgement of the other powerful predators who share this land and who are just as hungry, just as desperate to survive the winter as the people are. The father gets up, his movements unhurried. He lifts the door flap and slips outside into the maelstrom. The wind hits him like a solid wall. and the driving snow is a blinding, stinging spray against his face. He is not going far. Just a few yards from the teepee, he had earlier prepared their meat cache. With the ground frozen solid, digging a deep pit is impossible. Instead, he had chosen a slight depression in the ground, lined it with flat stones, and placed their store of frozen buffalo meat inside. The meat is their future, the food that will see them through the coming weeks of deep cold. He had covered the cache with more flat, heavy stones, and then a layer of thick, thorny brush. This was enough to protect it from smaller, less determined scavengers like coyotes or foxes. But a wolf pack, driven by the profound hunger of winter, is a different matter. A determined wolf is strong enough to pull aside the stones, to get at the life-giving meat below. The father moves through the deep, swirling darkness to the cache. The dog has followed him out, standing a few feet away, a dark, silent shadow against the snow, its nose pointed into the wind. The father bends down and, with a grunt of effort, lifts another heavy, flat boulder from a pile he had left nearby. This one is as much as he can carry. He carefully places it on top of the existing stone pile, adding its significant weight to the barricade. He pushes and pulls at the other stones, making sure they are interlocked and settled, as difficult as possible to dislodge. He is not building an impenetrable fortress. He knows that if the wolves were truly desperate, they could likely still get in. What he is doing is making it more difficult. He is adding another layer of discouragement. He is tipping the balance of effort versus reward. A predator, like all things in nature, operates on a strict economy of energy. It will not waste its precious strength on a difficult task if an easier one might be available elsewhere. By adding this one more heavy stone, the father is sending a clear, silent message to the prowling pack. This food will cost you more than you want to spend. Go hunt somewhere else. It is a small act, taking only a minute of his time, but it is a critical one. It is a quiet assertion of his family's claim, a reinforcement of the boundary between their carefully managed world and the wild, hungry world outside. The security of their winter rests upon these small, deliberate actions, this constant reinforcement of their defenses. With the final stone in place, he brushes the snow from his hands and turns back toward the warm, glowing light of the lodge, the dog trotting silently at his heels. The soft turn in the story is complete. The safety of the camp has been reaffirmed, not by fighting, but by a quiet act of foresight. As the night deepens, a profound stillness settles within the teepee, a quiet counterpoint to the storm's unrelenting fury. The father has returned, bringing a gust of cold, clean air and a fine dusting of snow with him, and has pinned the door flap securely shut. The family has eaten their small, rich meal of pemmican, and the tasks of the evening are complete. The grandmother has banked the fire, carefully arranging the heavy hardwood logs over the glowing cottonwood coals. The flames have died down, replaced by a deep, steady, radiant heat that pulses from a mound of cherry-red embers. This is the slow, enduring warmth that will guard them through the night. The light inside the lodge is now a soft, dim, and gentle red, a light that encourages rest. One by one, the family members settle into their sleeping robes, arranging the thick, heavy buffalo hides over their bodies, pulling them close. The boy is already asleep, his face relaxed in the firelight, lost in the uncomplicated dreams of childhood. The father and mother are resting quietly, their day's work done, their minds at ease in the security of the lodge they have built. The world is reduced to this small, warm circle, a sanctuary of breath and heartbeat held safely in the arms of the blizzard. But as the temperature outside plummets even further, plunging into the deep, dangerous negatives where the very air seems to crystallize, a subtle change begins to occur inside the lodge. It is a change so quiet it is almost imperceptible, a shift not in the shelter, but in one of the people within it. The grandfather, who had settled into his robes at the place of honor, at the back of the teepee opposite the door, is not resting as easily as the others. The grandmother, lying beside him, becomes aware of it first. She does not see it, but feels it, a subtle shift in the rhythm of the space they share. His breathing, which had been slow and even, has become a little more shallow, a little quicker. It is not the labored breathing of someone in distress, but the quiet, almost hesitant breath of a body that is working harder than it should be simply to stay warm. She reaches out a hand under the heavy robes and touches his. His skin, usually warm and dry like old leather, is cool. Not cold, not yet, but cool to the touch. And his feet, she knows, will be even cooler. This is not an illness. The grandfather is strong, his health as solid as the old cottonwoods that shelter their camp. This is something more insidious. This is the simple, dangerous reality of extreme cold on an older body. Age thins the blood and slows the fire within. The body's furnace does not burn as hot as it once did, and the ability to generate and retain heat diminishes with each passing winter. The systems that the family has so carefully put in place, the wind-proof walls, the insulated lining, the radiant fire, the warm fur robes, are enough to keep the younger members of the family comfortable and safe. But for the elder, on this night of profound and brutal cold, they are beginning to be not quite enough. The cold is a patient, creeping thief, and it has found the one small vulnerability in their fortress. It is a silent killer, slipping past their defenses and beginning to steal the precious warmth from their most vulnerable member. The grandmother shifts, her movements small and quiet, so as not to disturb the others. She props herself up on one elbow and looks at her husband's face in the dim, red glow of the coals. His eyes are closed, but his face is not fully relaxed. There is a tightness around his mouth, a subtle tension that speaks of a body fighting a quiet, internal battle. She knows that if this continues, his core temperature will slowly but surely begin to drop. First, his hands and feet will grow colder, then his limbs, as his body intelligently pulls all its resources back to the core, sacrificing the extremities to protect the vital organs. Sleep will become deeper, sliding into a lethargy from which it might be difficult to wake. And in the deepest, coldest hour of the night, just before the dawn, his internal fire could flicker and go out. The danger is not immediate, not yet, but it is real, and it is growing with every passing moment. The family has triumphed over the storm outside. Now they face a new and more subtle challenge, a storm that has begun to brew within their own small circle. The magnificent shelter they have built, the repository of generations of wisdom, is now being tested on a much deeper level. It is no longer just about keeping the wind and snow at bay. Now, the knowledge that built the teepee must be focused inward. The family must use their ingenuity not just to survive the storm, but to actively share and direct the precious warmth they have created. They must rally around their elder, not with panic or fear, but with the same quiet, purposeful intelligence they have applied to every other challenge of the day. The contest has become more personal, the stakes infinitely higher. It is no longer a matter of comfort, but of life. The problem is simple and stark. The heat from the fire is radiating through the lodge, but it is not enough to overcome the cold that is seeping into the old man's bones. They need to find a way to deliver a more concentrated, more direct, and more enduring warmth to where it is needed most, using only the resources they have within the teepee. The resolution will not come from some grand, heroic gesture. It will come, as all their solutions have, from a deep and practical understanding of the natural world, and from a series of small, almost silent acts of love and care. The family's greatest knowledge is not just in how to build a shelter, but in how to be a community, a living system that protects its most venerable parts. And now, in the deep silence of the blizzard night, that knowledge will be put to its ultimate test. The resolution to this quiet crisis comes not from a grand gesture or a newly invented tool, but from small, almost silent acts of care, guided by a knowledge as old as the stones themselves. The wisdom that built the shelter must now be applied with a jeweler's touch, focused and refined to address the specific, delicate needs of the elder. The grandmother's quiet observation has alerted the father, who now stirs from his rest. There is no spoken conversation, no discussion of strategy, a shared glance between the mother and father, A nod from the grandmother is all that is needed. They move as a single, coordinated organism, each member knowing their part in the intricate dance of providing comfort and life. The first act is undertaken by the grandmother, and it is an act of profound and simple genius. Beside the central fire pit, a small collection of smooth, flat gray stones has been sitting since the fire was first lit. These are river stones, carefully selected for their density and lack of cracks or fissures, which could cause them to fracture or even explode in the heat. They have been passively absorbing the radiant energy of the willow and cottonwood fire for hours, soaking the heat deep into their crystalline core. They are now thermal batteries, reservoirs of concentrated, enduring warmth. The grandmother takes a pair of wooden tongs and carefully, deftly, lifts one of these stones from the hot earth beside the fire. It glows with a faint, deep red, a visible sign of the immense heat it holds. She lays it on a piece of scrap hide to protect the ground, then takes several more pieces of old, worn-out deerskin, softened by years of use, and begins to wrap the stone. She does this with great care, adding layer after layer, creating a thick, insulated package. This is crucial. A stone this hot placed directly against the skin would cause a severe burn, but wrapped in these multiple layers of soft hide, it becomes a source of gentle, penetrating, and long-lasting heat. The hide acts as a regulator, slowing the release of the thermal energy, transforming a dangerously intense heat source into a therapeutic warmth that can last for hours. She has created a perfect, portable radiator, a small, personal sundae. She makes 2 more of these heat packs, her hands moving with the unthinking efficiency of a task performed 1,000 times before. She then moves to her husband's side. Without waking him, she gently lifts the edge of his heavy buffalo robes and slides the warm bundles into the cold spaces. One is placed near his feet, the coldest part of his body, tucked deep into the fur. Another is placed against the small of his back, where its deep, penetrating warmth can radiate directly into his core. The third she nestles near his chest. The effect is almost immediate. The cool skin begins to warm, the tension in his face begins to soften, and the shallow, rapid breathing starts to slow, to deepen. The stones are giving back the fire's gift, delivering it directly to where it is most needed, a transfusion of warmth that begins to push back the encroaching chill. While the grandmother tends to the elder, the father turns his attention to the fire itself. He too moves with a quiet, deliberate purpose. He knows that simply adding more wood would be a mistake. A larger, hotter fire would make the area closest to it uncomfortably warm while doing little to change the temperature at the cooler, outer edges of the lodge where his father is resting. His solution is more subtle, an adjustment not of the fire's intensity, but of its direction. He takes his digging stick and begins to subtly resculpt the bed of glowing hardwood coals. He is not building the fire up, but is banking it, pushing the coals together on the side facing away from his father, and creating a shallow, sloping wall of ash and earth on the side facing toward him. He is effectively building a reflector. This small, slanted wall will now catch the radiant heat that would have otherwise gone straight up or to the other side of the lodge, and it will reflect it horizontally, in a focused, gentle beam, directly toward the old man's sleeping place. It is a small change in the fire's geometry, an almost unnoticeable adjustment, but it significantly alters the thermal dynamics of the entire space. It redirects a portion of the fire's precious energy, concentrating it where it is needed, without overheating the rest of the lodge. It is an act of engineering on a miniature scale, an elegant and efficient solution that uses no extra fuel, only a deeper understanding of how heat moves through the world. Now it is the boy's turn to play his part. He has been awakened by the quiet movements and is watching, his eyes wide in the dim red light. The mother beckons to him. His task is the simplest, but no less important. She whispers to him to check the dew cloth, the inner lining, behind his grandfather. Over the course of an evening, with people moving about, the bottom of this lining can sometimes get kicked or pushed out of place, creating small gaps where cold air from the space between the walls can leak into the living area. The boy crawls on his hands and knees to the back of the lodge. He runs his small hands along the bottom edge of the dew cloth where it meets the ground. He finds a spot where it is pulled away from the outer wall, creating a small, almost undetectable draft of colder air. He carefully tucks the hide back into place, pushing it snugly against the outer teepee cover, sealing the small leak. He then takes handfuls of the soft, dry grass that had been spread on the floor for insulation and pushes it against the base of the lining, creating an extra seal, a tiny barricade against the cold. It is a small thing, a child's task, but in a system where survival depends on the sum of many small efficiencies, it is a vital contribution. He is a part of the solution, a member of the circle of care. These 3 acts, performed in quiet concert, are the pinnacle of the family's survival knowledge. They are the gift of the river stones, the clever redirection of the fire's warmth, and the meticulous sealing of the final, smallest drafts. They are tiny adjustments, quiet offerings of warmth that, when combined, create a profound effect. The father, the grandmother, and the boy have wrapped the elder in a multi-layered cocoon of directed heat. The warmth from the stones radiates from within his robes. The heat from the reflector fire warms him from the outside, and the perfectly sealed inner lining protects him from any stray currents of cold air. They have brought their small domestic system back into balance. They have met the challenge not with force, but with finesse. The grandfather's breathing, which had been the first quiet signal of the crisis, now becomes the signal of its resolution. The shallow, hesitant breaths have given way to a slow, deep, and rhythmic cadence. It is the sound of a body at peace, a body that has stopped fighting the cold and is now resting deeply in a secure and profound warmth. The tightness has left his face, replaced by the placid calm of deep sleep. The family, their work done, settles back into their own robes. They have not just weathered the storm, they have cared for one another. They have proven that their greatest strength lies not in the cleverness of their shelter, but in the strength of their connection, their ability to focus their collective knowledge and love on the one who needed it most. In the heart of the great blizzard, they have created not just an island of warmth, but an island of grace. The end of the storm arrives as quietly as its beginning. Sometime in the deep, silent hours before dawn, the great engine of the wind begins to slow. The relentless, roaring pressure against the hide walls lessens. The high-pitched shriek around the smoke flaps fades to a low hum, and then, finally, to a whisper. By the time the first hint of light appears, the world outside the tipi has fallen into a profound and muffled silence, a stillness so deep and so absolute it feels like the whole world is holding its breath under a heavy, white blanket. The first light of this new day does not arrive as a beam, but as a slow, pervasive change in the quality of the darkness. It filters down through the open smoke hole, a pale, ethereal, blue-gray glow that gently illuminates the inside of the lodge. It is a clean and lonely light, the color of winter dawn, and it reveals a scene of deep peace. The fire has burned down to a small pulsing mound of soft gray ash with a few ruby-red embers winking sleepily within it. The air inside is cool now, but not cold. The family is still asleep, cocooned in their heavy robes, their breath making small, fleeting clouds in the dim air. The grandfather's breathing is slow and deep, a steady, reassuring rhythm in the quiet space. They have passed through the storm. They have passed through the quiet crisis of the night, and they have emerged, whole and warm, into the calm of the new day. The father is the first to stir. He rises from his robes, his movements slow and deliberate so as not to disturb the others. He goes to the front of the lodge and begins to remove the chokecherry pins that hold the door flap shut. With the final pin removed, he pulls the heavy hide inward and looks out upon a world transformed. The landscape he sees is pristine, sculpted, and buried in a deep and immaculate layer of new snow. Every sharp edge of the world has been softened, every rough texture smoothed away. The tangled willow brush is now a series of soft, rolling white mounds. The cottonwood trees are draped in heavy coats of white, their branches bowed under the weight. The ground is a perfect, unbroken blanket of snow that sparkles with a faint, crystalline light as the sky brightens. There is not a single mark upon it, not a track, not a sign of the struggle and fury of the night, except for two. The first is a delicate, wandering line of tiny prints that leads from the riverbank, passes within a few yards of the teepee, and then disappears into the woods. A lone fox, another survivor of the storm, has passed in the night, its own silent journey recorded for a moment in the new snow before the wind erases it. The second mark is their own, the faint, gray-blue plume of smoke rising from the peak of their lodge, climbing straight up into the still, frozen air, a quiet, vertical announcement of their presence, their warmth, their life. It is the only sign of humanity in this vast white wilderness. The father steps out into the new day, the dry powder snow crunching softly under his moccasins. He breathes in the air. It is intensely cold, but clean and sharp and pure. The iron-gray sky of the storm has been washed away, replaced by a soft, clear, pale blue that deepens to a vibrant turquoise at the eastern horizon, where the unseen sun is beginning its climb. He feels the immense, cleansing peace of the morning after a great blizzard, the feeling of a world scrubbed clean and made new again. He looks back at the teepee, at their small conical home standing steadfast and strong in the morning light. From the outside, it is a simple, humble structure, but he sees it for what it truly is, a masterpiece of design, a model not just for a shelter, but for a community. It is a circle, with the fire, the source of life, at its center. It is strongest at that center, and all its parts lean inward, supporting one another. The poles, each one individual and strong on its own, achieve their true strength only by leaning together, by sharing the load. The hide cover, a patchwork of many individual pieces, becomes a single, unified barrier only when stitched and pinned together. It is flexible in the wind, yielding without breaking, its conical shape a perfect expression of stability and grace. The knowledge of the ancestors, passed down through his father and his father's father, had provided the design, the geometry, the engineering, but it was the family's care for one another, the grandmother's wisdom with the stones, his own careful tending of the fire, the boy's small, diligent act of sealing the draft, that had made it a true home, a living sanctuary that could not be breached. He turns and begins the first tasks of the day, gathering a fresh load of dry willow to restart the fire, his movements a quiet expression of gratitude for the warmth and safety of the night. The lesson of the storm is clear. Survival is not a singular act of defiance against nature. It is a communal act of harmony with it and with each other. It is the quiet wisdom of choosing the right place, the patient skill of building the right shelter, and the selfless love that directs the warmth to where it is needed most. And now, as the father gathers the wood, and the first direct rays of sunlight strike the snow, making the whole world glitter as if it were scattered with diamonds, our story comes to a close. The sun is fully risen now, and its light on the new snow is almost blinding. Inside the lodge, the family is stirring, their breath making small clouds in the cool morning air. The fire is built up again, the bright, cheerful flames of the willow quickly giving way to the steady heat of the cottonwood. Soon the smell of melting snow and warm broth will fill the small space. They have passed through the storm. The grandfather is sitting up, wrapped in his robe, sipping a warm drink from a horn cup. He catches his grandson's eye and gives him a small, slow smile. The world is quiet, and now, as our story ends, you can feel that same quiet entering your own room. The work is done. The shelter is secure. The fire is burning low and steady, a bed of warm, glowing embers. You can feel the weight of the warm furs around you, the safety of the strong poles above you, the stillness of the sleeping world outside. There is nothing more to do now, nothing more to learn for today. All that is left is to rest in this place of warmth and safety. You can let go of the day and allow the quiet of the snow-covered plains to settle over you. Just rest now. Just rest.